terribly exciting, but this is the inside of my Hyundai, my personal driver. But it does have one cool feature. That's Fred. He's always with me. Well, heidi ho, YouTube neighbors. It is day 2 in my experiment, and I got my drink, Rockstar Pina Colada. This is a non-paid product placement. Would be nice though. And got nothing but road in front of me. Those of you worried, I'm not actually holding my phone or anything, but got this cool device that I'll show you that I rigged from my GoPro. And so join me. We're listening to Whitley Strieber, and he's got a guest on. They're talking about shadow people and I think demons. So listen closely.
Now, in your book, you talk about your own experience, but for the most part, you cite, I would say, dozens, maybe more than 50 different people who've had these experiences. And they all seem to be alike in one respect. These things that you see, the shadow people, you can't really discern facial features, can you?
No, the only features that can be determined on these things are if they appear to be wearing clothing or not, or the fact that they've got 2 arms and 2 legs. Sometimes fingers. People can see that much definition, but never facial features.
So the fascinating thing to me is that these are humanoid or human-type creatures. I mean, they look like us in silhouette, basically.
Correct. But the one exception to that is they look like they almost look like us. There's in all of the cases that I've reported in the book, and my personal one is there's just something a little bit different about them. They're not exactly a carbon copy of a human. They may be 7 foot tall. Their arms may be a little bit too long. Their head may be a little bit bigger for their body than what a normal human's would be. There's always something that's just a little bit off.
Right. And their motions, their movements are not quite fluid human motions. Am I correct?
Right. The motions are a little bit jerky, like bad stop and go animation.
Right. Okay. So now, in your book, you talk about most people have bad reactions towards this. I mean, they're terrified by this experience. Would you say that in general, the reaction is a negative one?
In almost every single case, it's been negative from extremes. In my case, I was scared, but it was just the fact that I was seeing these human-shaped things walking through my room, and I was afraid like anybody would be. But there are people who feel a terror, an unnatural terror from these creatures, like the creatures are placing this terror inside them. These types of shadow people who elicit this type of feeling are always ones that take notice of the person in the room. They will look directly at them. They will react if the other person moves. I've had it described as the terror. It makes people feel like the shadow people are feeding off of this negative energy that they're creating inside people. So there are a bunch of different categories of shadow people, and fortunately, this is not one that I encountered.
Right. You mentioned all of the various types of entities, types of shadow people, which we'll get into in the next segment, which we'll start in a little bit. But it sounds from what you're saying that at times this kind of vampiric nature to them, that, as you just mentioned, they're feeding off of your own terror. Somehow it causes them to get stronger.
Right, and like I said, there have been a lot of cases on that, and it's generally the certain types of shadow people with certain physical traits that are this type of shadow people. And like I said, we will discuss the different types, I guess in the next segment.
Yeah, when we get back, I'd like to talk about that, and I'd also like to talk a little bit about how, in so many cases, or in a handful of cases anyway, people have actually caused them to show up using a Ouija board or some other means. And I'd like to get back into that. What we're doing is we're talking to Jason Offit. Did I say that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, great. The author of Darkness Walks, The Shadow People Among Us. This is Peter Lavenda for Dreamland, and we'll be right back.
Dreamland subscribers, don't miss the live chat with Whitley and Ann Strieber in the Unknown Country chat room next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific Time.
And we are back with Jason Offit, the author of Darkness Walks, The Shadow People Among Us. As I say, Jason, I found this to be a fascinating topic because I had not been aware of it, quite frankly. I mean, I've been aware of hauntings and possessions and alien visitations and all this other stuff that, you know, that is so much part of the literature, but to come across something like this was an eye-opener towards me. And not only is there this genre of experience called the shadow people, but you've broken it down into different types of shadow people: the benign shadows, the negative, the red-eyed, the buzzing, the angry, hooded shadows, and the shadows that attack, and even the hat men. Can you tell us a little bit about these different types of entities? I mean, how they break down?
Yeah, well, and when I started on this, I knew of the type that I had encountered, the benign shadows, I call them. Benign because they never did anything to me except for walk through my room. But I noticed as I interviewed people who have experienced shadow people, certain characteristics of shadow people and behaviors they corresponded. There is one specific entity that has red eyes, red glowing eyes, which would frankly terrify me. These are always negative. These are the ones that elicit the terror, the unnatural terror in people, and people feel they're feeding off of them. They feel that these creatures are evil. These things appear threatening, not just their their appearance and the feeling, but sometimes how they act. I mean, there was a woman I spoke with who one night she got up to use the restroom. She was like 8 months pregnant, and a door to the bathroom faced, when you're in your bathroom, you face the hallway, and she saw one of these creatures staring at her, and then it started walking toward her, and she was trapped in this little room all by herself. That sort of stalking behavior is generally only for the red-eyed types of shadows. The Hat Man is another one that you mentioned. This is an absolutely fascinating one because it appears to wear a fedora. I've talked to a number of different people who've encountered a Hat Man who's worn a derby or another type of old-fashioned hat, but these tend to act more like ghostly encounters than shadow people encounters. Hat men take notice of people in their homes or passing them on the street at night. They tend to notice you. They don't necessarily scare you. They just are paying attention to you, which frankly is scary enough. The buzzing shadows emit a noise that sounds like you're walking too close to a power station or bees buzzing. The people I've interviewed have felt this is some sort of communication with the shadow people. This has also been, some people think that the buzzing shadow people could be interdimensional travelers. There's not just one explanation for what these creatures could be.
Well, the odd thing to me is that there seems to be no rhyme or reason to their existence. It's not as if they're trying to tell us something. From what I gather from your book, there doesn't seem to be any desire on the part of these entities to communicate or to do something other than a negative thing, which is to scare the hell out of you. And but past that, there doesn't seem to be anything more there, is there? Or am I wrong?
Other than feeding off the fear, or in the case of the ones that I saw, and other people have seen the same thing. They've gotten the impression that these things are just going from point A to point B, and right through our house or right through our lives is where their highway is, and we just happen to be able to see them. But do they want anything from us other than to feed from us, or other than to terrify us? It doesn't seem so.
I've noticed in your book too that, as I mentioned before, there's a Ouija board connection. It seems to be that people become sensitized to this well, I'm speculating here. Maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth. I don't know if they're being sensitized to this experience, or they're creating this experience, creating a means for these creatures to enter by using paranormal communication methods such as the Ouija board. Can you tell us a little bit about that, or what people have told you about that?
Well, it's just the Ouija board experiences are the ones I had the most of, but it could be any other type of invitation, a seance, automatic writing. Any time when you are inviting something from the other side to communicate with you, a lot of times they will come, and a number of occurrences in the book are shadow people that have answered the invitation and have followed people around for a while just because they become attached to them. I've had a number of cases where shadow people seem to be attached to certain people and will follow them around. And a lot of times with something like a Ouija board, it seems like that this is what happens to them. Yeah, they come join the party and then they never leave.
Well, but that sets up a whole bunch of questions in my mind. You know, at one point we're talking about them sort of passing through, as you said, as if our world is kind of highway that they're walking down or traveling through, and then suddenly there is this option, there is this possibility that you can initiate contact with the shadow people where there haven't been any before. You can start it going, and then suddenly you're stuck with this entity that now seems to be attached to you in some way. I mean, it's unusual. I mean, it's from a Christian point of view, you might say these are demonic types, as you mentioned in your book. They could be, ghosts. They could be spiritual forces, but their characteristics are so unique that it kind of puts them outside that normal framework, doesn't it?
Well, yes, it does. But it also, to me, the basic opinion that I've gotten through researching and writing the book is that these entities are different. There are different specific types of entities. Some behave demonically, some don't. And there's a myriad of ones in between. I think that there are different explanations for some. Some are ghosts. Some could be an image we're seeing, people astral projecting. Some could very well be demonic entities, judging from the way a lot of these creatures act. Yes, they probably are. So just by saying shadow people, that is the basic description. But I think there are a lot of different things.
Well, one of the anecdotes you mentioned in your book, which has kind of stuck with me for a while. You had one researcher in Moundsville, West Virginia. I believe she was a paranormal researcher going through the penitentiary there. And I've written about that particular building in a different context. I think Squeaky Frummy was there. The lady tried to kill Gerald Ford, member of the Manson family. And because of Moundsville, there are the Indian burial mounds there, which will be a topic of another Dreamland sometime down the pike. But so you have the burial mounds, you have all of this taking place, and then you have a researcher going through a disused structure at the penitentiary in West Virginia, seeing one of these shadow people shining a flashlight on it, and then it reacts to the light. I mean, it holds an arm up to its face. It appears to be looking at the light on the shadow person itself. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience? I mean, she took a photograph, I believe, didn't she?
Right.
Or tried to.
She tried to, and yes, that was a fascinating story that I got from her. Her and her team were investigating, and she was down a hallway by herself, and she noticed this shadow person walking down the hall. She said it looked a lot like maybe she thought it was a ghost of a guard, still doing his rounds down the hall. But she also said that when it noticed her, it appeared two-dimensional, and it like classic.
Today's been a pretty crazy day. A lot of crazy drivers. They're not really gonna have a chance to eat today, so this candy bar will remain nameless. And yes, there is a hunger inside me.
That these creatures are, as I mentioned, not entirely.
Yeah, it's so good.
Created like a human.
I gotta see you in a minute on the road.
Their arms might be too long.
And obviously this thing, whatever it is casting a reflection, which automatically means it's a physical entity.
Right.